This one is for writing in percent as a fraction and a decimal. There's a couple of there's some con lessons and some IXL lessons that you can use this video to help you for. So in order to be able to write a percent as a fraction and a decimal, you need to understand that percent is out of 100. Then you can write that percent as a fraction and then simplify it. Then you also need to understand that when percent is written as a fraction, out of 100, you can read it like it's written as a decimal. And that's that connection to the 100 and the decimal, the way we read decimals in hundredths, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. We're going to be talking about that as we go through some of these examples. All right, let's go ahead and look at our first example here. So we have our first one as 23%, and percent means parts of 100 or out of 100, and it's so percents are related to a part to whole, so they're part-whole ratios. In other words, fractions. Okay, fractions are always part to whole, but in this case, the whole is out of 100 in a percent. So we're going to go ahead and write this as a fraction. So if we think of this 23%, that means 23 out of 100. So we could just write that simply as 23 out of 100. Then if it would reduce down, we would go ahead and try to do that. In this case, it won't reduce down. So let's look at another one here. We want to write it as a decimal. So if we read this 23 hundredths, so as 23 hundredths is the way we would read this. The hundredths is two places after the decimal. So we would have the decimal would have to be here in order for the two places after to be 23 hundredths. So we would have it right here. So 23 hundredths. So again, 3 is in the hundredths place. So 23 hundredths. The 3 has to be in the hundredths place. And that's going to be important, making sure you understand this connection to the percent and the hundredths place in dealing with decimals and percents. All right, let's go ahead and look at another one here. So in this case, I have 120%. So again, percent is out of 100, so we can simply write that as a fraction. In this case, it will simplify down. If we look at that, we know 10 will go into it because it ends with a 0. They're also both even, so that means 2 has to go into it. So that means 20 will definitely go into it. So if we divide them both by 20, we end up with 6/5. So that's the simplified fraction. And if you can simplify these, you always should. So that's 6/5. So 20% is 6/5 as a simplified fraction. But again, you can just write it as 120 over 100. So let's go ahead and write this one as a decimal. So if we take 120% and write that as 120 over 100, we need to look at this, and that is 1 and 20 hundredths is the kind of the way we would look at this. 1 and 20 hundredths, because it's one whole and 20 hundredths. So we would have the one whole, because there's 100, and then 20 hundredths. So 1 and 20 hundredths. You could put it as 1.2, but often it's better to leave it as 1 and 20 hundredths, just so again we recognize that we are talking about that hundredths place when we're making the connection to percents. All right, let's look at one more here. So if we have this one, 7.8%. So that is, again, out of 100, so percent's out of 100, so we go ahead and write that as 7.8%, or 7.8 over 100. But the thing is, on this one, we don't want to leave a decimal in our fraction, in our numerator here. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of that decimal, and the way we can do that is we can times it by 10 to move that over, and that will move our decimal over. Again, times it by 10 over 10, so we're multiplying it by 1 and not changing the value. Again, that idea of a giant 1, so we don't change the value of it. And we end up with 78 thousandths. So then we need to go ahead and write that as a decimal. So we have, and if you start understanding this, if you realize that this is in the hundredths place, then this has to be in the thousandths place. And if there's another decimal, it'd be in the 10,000ths place. And you can go right to this a lot of times once you start getting good at converting these to decimals. But once you get it written as 78 thousandths, then you need to understand how to write these as a decimal. So the key thing is This 8 is in the thousandths place. So we need to make sure when we write it is... Oh, sorry, I'm simplifying this first. This one will simplify. I forgot about that. We simplify it down, divide it by 2, and we get 39 over 500. So again, do simplify these if you can. Now let's go on to writing this as a decimal. So we have 78 thousandths. So we go ahead and make sure we write that down as... So again, we have tenths, hundredths, and thousandths place. So that needs to be in the thousandths place since it's 78 thousandths. So good luck with these. Let me know if you have any questions, need any help. Again, this will help you out for both the NIXL and a con lesson on writing fractions as percents and decimals, or writing percents as a fraction and a decimal. Good luck. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a good day. Bye.